Yes.
Are you familiar with the term gentrification?
Yeah.
Do you recognize any areas within the Douglas County that that process has been implemented?
My personal opinion would be that you're seeing its gentrification's impact on between 24th and 42nd Street, between Dodge and Center, Leavenworth area. That area has seen a lot of new development in the past 5 or 6 years, and it had generations of disinvestment that was sort of facilitated by westward expansion. And now that investment's coming back into the city, and there's displacement that's occurring in those areas.
That's a broad-based definition of gentrification. Are you familiar with the segregation laws of 1913 for Omaha?
I don't know about 1913. I'm aware of the redlining map for the Homeowners Loan Corporation of 1938 that was made for Omaha.
Those were able to be put in place because of the segregation law that was implemented in Omaha, Nebraska, restricting blacks from living and dealing with the white community altogether. It was 1913. You're not familiar with that?
I have not seen that, but I don't doubt that it's
But you do recognize the redlining and the school segregating and those kinds of things that went on between Cummings and, let's say, Benny Street. Mm-hmm. You familiar with that?
Yes. I know the neighborhoods that were defined as hazardous neighborhoods, that there wouldn't be any credit given to those neighborhoods due to the Homeowners Loan Corporation map of 1938, like I mentioned.
And that the redlining was extended all the way up until probably the latter part of the 60s. You familiar with that?
Yeah, it was made illegal in 1968, but yes.
Okay. When I ask about the historical kinds of things as it applies to the development of Omaha and the restrictions, particularly as it applies to, at that time, the black population, African Americans, it's hard to use that term now because there are other cultures that have been brought into the community whose genetic makeup is also black, even to the point where the identification of blacks in this community have been multiplied by Sudanese, Somalians, as applies to traditional African Americans. The African American population in this area has decreased over 40% because of housing redistribution through the authorities and other kinds of issues. I'm bringing this up because it's very difficult for a business community in North Omaha to gather interest when you don't have any control over ideas and concepts that have been brought to the front when they're all dissipated within governmental structures. You understand what I'm saying?
I think so.
We have a history of issues in North Omaha as it applies to blacks traditionally. Minuscule of those complaints historically have been addressed. Here too, we're here today, we're talking about dealing with developmental plans. When you said that you didn't know about the industrialization, the area between 24th and 16th, Cummings to Ames, has been identified as industrial residential ever since the latter part of the 70s and 80s, where downtown Omaha would be going this way along with Creighton. Because of whatever kinds of activities, a lot of that has always been disrupted. Tearing down of the projects for redevelopment, misplacement of the people that are in the projects, all over. How is a community that is not accessed with individuals from the community to participate in those kinds of dialogues going to be able to gain confidence in its constituency that these things are not going to happen anymore?
I don't know. That's why I asked, if you all weren't at this meeting, then we need to continue.
We weren't at that meeting because there's no mechanism in place to communicate to our organization. We've met with the city planning department. They testified that 70% of the neighborhood organizations that they are accounted for are represented. They testify to that. For the last 30 years, it's been like that. So when you talk about getting out information to individuals, if you don't have a mechanism in place that's consistent in order for people to communicate those kinds of things, then you turn out with situations where we are not represented at all, and the so-called powers to be do what they want to do. And when we challenge them based upon those kinds of issues, they say, well, we didn't get that kind of information.
I think, Elijah, what Jeff is asking is he wants to get input from everyone here so that that won't happen, because he's trying to get ideas of, okay, what else can we do, MAPA, to, like when information or meetings are taking place, how can they best get that information out to the residents so that they don't hear about it on the 10 o'clock news, but that they're part of that discussion. So I think what he's trying to get is your input on what other ways can that information get out there, that if there is a public meeting and we want to get your input and ideas and so on and so forth. So I think that's what he was asking even from the beginning.
Well, that's why I asked him the question if he understood the term gentrification. Because in all of our analysis, it's too late anyway. Because the basic needs that we have, the majority of our younger people and those who are still of the age to look at development have moved not only out of this area, but have moved out of Omaha. The population of blacks, African Americans in this town have decreased close to 10,000 since the last census. All right? So it's all well and good to come in now and say we want to do this and we're open-armed, because for all practical purposes, the wrongdoing that has been historical in this town since 1913 has never been rectified. The area that has to be developed as it applies to the development of downtown along the industrial part, which was predominantly earmarked for blacks because of the segregation laws of 1913, had been totally exacerbated and turned around. So to come in now in this late date and time talking about doing things as it applies to this corridor, we're not just talking about the black population, because they have been disseminated throughout this whole city, if no more the reason than like the housing authority, which is a sophisticated mechanism of redlining. So when you talk about being open and fair at this particular point in time as it applies to a geographical area, you're a day late and a dollar short.
Your point is well taken, I think, but I think what he's trying to do is he's trying to help the situation. So you have to start somewhere, honestly. You have to start somewhere.
Well, starting somewhere is all well and good, but when you have a history of being not only illegal, but totally racist in your dealings with a certain community, and now that damage has been put totally into effect, for those new coming into the community and may be able to take advantage, whatever they may be able to take advantage of good, that's all well and good. But when a city gathers as much money as this city has on community block grant money historically, that has been identified to rectify a wrong that has been done historically, and it has not been done, then you don't say, okay, fine, everything's well and good, let's start on from here. Because those masses of people that have been misused and have not been rectified.
I don't think anybody's saying that things are well and good. You know, I mean, these injustices that have happened in the past, I wasn't here earlier, and I couldn't have done anything about it, and I'm sorry that it happened.
Sorries don't help. Sorries don't help.